Hello, and welcome to this news event sponsored by the law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway, or Peiffer Wolf for short. You'll be hearing from three speakers today, and then we'll open the floor for questions during the Q&A period. The Q&A period is for reporters only. If you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. For more info, you can go to www.peifferwolf.com, and also a direct link to today's news release related to today's news event is available in the chat window, so you can check that link. As I mentioned, you'll be hearing from three speakers today. First is attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway, and then we'll hear from Linda and Tim Ratton, parents of EF. So let's go ahead and begin with our first speaker, attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. Adam, go ahead.
Good morning. Welcome to this news event organized by Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. We are here today to provide a platform for Linda and Tim Ratton and their very brave son, a young man to whom we'll refer as EF. The Rattons have a very powerful story to tell you. And what I want to do now is just to sketch out the big picture. The Ratton son, like the other 55 children whose stem cells were destroyed by Children's Hospital Los Angeles, suffers from a particularly aggressive cancer for which stem cell treatment is vital. More specifically, EF has been fighting stage 4 neuroblastoma, a very rare and vicious cancer that almost always affects young children. When fighting cancers like this, a child's healthy stem cells are collected prior to chemotherapy for future treatment. But the Ratton son won't be able to use those precious stem cells because his were destroyed by shocking and intentional misconduct of Children's Hospital Los Angeles. The bottom line is this: CHLA purchased a cryogenic freezer in 1988. That's nearly a third of a century ago. CHLA knew this freezer had a lifespan of 10 years and would need to be replaced. The hospital disregarded this basic safety and kept using the ancient freezer for so long that when EF had his stem cells harvested in 2014, the freezer was already 16 years past its shelf life. It gets worse. When the freezer alarm started to go off in the summer of 2019, a clear signal that it was failing, CHLA intentionally turned off the alarms. Then, the inevitable happened. In September 2019, the freezer failed, and the precious stem cells of EF and 55 other brave children battling cancer were destroyed. Children's Hospital Los Angeles then sent mere form letters, unconscionably addressed to the children themselves, and made knowingly false public statements that the stem cells were not needed and no lives were put at risk. The harshly different reality is that EF and the other 55 children may now be left defenseless against recurrence of their cancer. As CHLA's own doctors put it, the family's best option is to hope and pray. But hoping and praying will not get their stem cells back. This is not about some ancient freezer that failed. It's about the lives of the 56 brave young cancer victims, and about a hospital that carelessly, recklessly, and knowingly disregarded the health of these vulnerable children. EF's health and life is at risk today because his stem cells were destroyed by Children's Hospital Los Angeles. This did not have to happen. It should not have happened. And we want to send a message so that this never happens again. So today, EF, his parents, and many other devastated families filed lawsuits against CHLA in Superior Court in Los Angeles with 10 claims, including but not limited to fraud. What happened at CHLA, Children's Hospital Los Angeles, is tragic, and it was completely avoidable. 56 children who were fighting cancer had the rug pulled out from under them by the institution that was supposed to be helping them. The stem cells were destroyed as a direct result of the shocking and intentional misconduct by CHLA. EF stem cells were both a lifeline and a safety net for him, with vital peace of mind that they were protected now and into the future. CHLA destroyed that. That concludes my opening statement. I look forward to taking your questions, and I urge you to listen to the words of Linda and Tim. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Again, that was attorney Adam Wolf, partner at Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. So let's proceed to our next speakers, Linda and Tim Ratton, parents of EF. Go ahead, Linda and Tim.
Thank you, Adam. First, sorry. Bear with me for a minute. It's hard to hear the story, even though I know what happened. First, I'd like to say how incredibly proud I am of my brave son, who is now 7 years old and has been battling for 6 years, and he's still in treatment. He's truly my hero. And anyone who's met a child fighting cancer is in awe of their strength. It's truly amazing. The journey of childhood cancer is a nightmare. It's a parent's worst nightmare, something I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's day in and day out from the time of diagnosis, and essentially for the rest of the life of your child. Because along with the brutal treatment that they undergo are the lifelong side effects that they endure. I already lived this nightmare, and as of September, when we found out that CHLA destroyed my son's stem cells, it amplified my anxiety and my fear tenfold. I'm in shock still, even knowing the details and as time has passed. Unlike many of the other families that found out about this disaster via a generic form letter that was addressed to their children, I found out through a social media post from a friend of mine, another mother of a cancer child. When I saw her post, I was shocked and outraged. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was extremely saddened for her and for her son, whose stem cells were lost. All I could do was express my sympathy to her for her son's lost stem cells and offer my support for her and her family. There was nothing else I could think to do. When word of what I had posted on social media got out to CHLA, I received a phone call from someone from CHLA, and I was thoroughly confused because up until that point, I assumed that we had nothing to do with this disaster, that my son's stem cells were not lost, since we never received a letter. The person went on to explain that my son's stem cells were in fact destroyed. I immediately burst out into tears with this person, and I kept asking her, "Are you sure we never received a letter? Are you sure that my son's stem cells were lost? Were all the bags lost?" She didn't even have a complete answer at that point. But as I proceeded to think about it rationally, I figured if some of his stem cells were lost, they probably were all lost. Sorry, I have to refer to my notes because my emotions take over and I need to have things in order in my head. One curious thing about not having received that form letter is finding out that our letter, which was addressed to my son, who's 7 years old, was sent to an address that had nothing to do with us, an address that we've never been associated with. However, at that same time, we were receiving medical bills from CHLA and collection bills. So I found it even more shocking that not only were we part of this disaster, we weren't even properly notified. And properly notified should have been a phone call or a personal visit, not a form letter addressed to our children. Soon after finding out, my son was a victim of the stem cells being destroyed. I started seeing CHLA, Children's Hospital Los Angeles, CHLA's statements online and through media stories. And I was completely shocked to hear how they tried to downplay this and how they tried to explain that this wasn't really a big deal and no one was at risk or no one was harmed. They essentially were bold-faced lying because that's not what we were told by CHLA from day one. My son has relapsed 3 times with neuroblastoma cancer, meaning his cancer has come back 3 times. Each time his treatment has had to be more aggressive, his chemotherapy and his radiation. And as a result of the aggressive treatment, stem cell rescues are needed to help his body recover. Without them, his body doesn't recover. At this point, essentially, we've been told that in the event of another relapse, which obviously we pray doesn't happen, it would be a miracle for the medical team to be able to harvest stem cells from my son. His bone marrow is essentially damaged from all the treatment he's received. And what's troubling is that CHLA knows this, and they have tried to, well, they've made statements essentially saying that it's not a big deal, no one's at risk, no one's been harmed. It's shocking. When I saw those statements and I heard a doctor from there downplay this incident, it just felt like a slap in the face to me. It just felt like CHLA doesn't care about my son, his life and his well-being. And that hurt. That hurt because you're talking about an institution that boasts and advertises itself as one of the best children's hospitals in the nation. The best children's hospital in the nation doesn't do something this awful. It just doesn't. Essentially, we wanted to speak out today to show how deeply affected we are by this. We're very private people. We don't enjoy the idea of a lawsuit at all. It's not who we are. It's not where we want to focus our attention. Our son is still in treatment. And we'd like to be able to focus on that and not focus on this. But here we are. And I just can't allow for CHLA to have done something so catastrophic and sit there and pretend that this wasn't a big deal. I just can't let another family go through this pain and the fear and anxiety that comes with it. The fear and anxiety that was already there from my son's diagnosis that now has just been heightened to just an enormous degree. Thank you for your time. I'll pass it over to my husband now.
Thank you. So my wife just shared with you a small glimpse into our world and how it was turned upside down by CHLA, destroying our son's stem cells. And I want to take a minute to share with you some of my thoughts that I've written down. I wanted to bring to your attention that it's coming up on a year now that we learned CHLA had put our son's health and his life in danger. Our son He's been battling cancer since he was 13 months old. And for a hospital that was to give us such hope, to now just strip it away from us has been devastating. It's unthinkable that they would use ancient freezers, as they did, freezers to store our son's stem cells, freezers that were decades old. It just doesn't make any sense to us. And then to top it off, they turned off the alarms to these freezers that stored my son's stem cells and then these other family stem cells inside of them. And I just can't make sense of it. I don't think there is a way to make sense of it. It was bad enough that they were putting these stem cells in an old refrigerator or freezer. But then to top it off, they go ahead and turn off the alarms on purpose. These are not freezers that you're storing your food in. These are freezers that held my son's stem cells in, freezer that holds life and death material inside of them. And for this, they need to be held accountable. The fact that they decided that they were just irritated by an alarm going off and decided to turn it off, taking precedence over my son's own health, is disgusting to me. My son no longer has any stem cells. We don't have them, but we're going to stand with our son to hold CHLA, Children's Hospital Los Angeles, accountable for their actions. We're going to stand with our son and stand with the other families so that the world knows what happened here. And we're doing that today. What Children's Hospital Los Angeles did to us needs to be known. And we do thank you for your time.
Thank you again. That was Linda and Tim Ratton. And that takes us to the Q&A portion of the call. If you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. And as a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you're having any issues with your own audio or the raise your hand function, you may use the text-based Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. And before we take our first question, I want to mention that a video recording of this news event will be available online at peifferwolf.com. That's peifferwolf.com, no spaces. And let's go ahead and take our first question. It looks like it's from Claudia Pashuta at KNX.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit, please, about how you know that the alarms were turned off, and was that a one-time incident, or did it happen several times? And then also, if you could talk a little bit about the stem cell harvesting process and the difficulties in harvesting again, so I can understand what the loss of this means. Thank you.
Sure. I appreciate the question, Claudia. I'm happy to answer the first part of it, and maybe Linda and Tim, who have really lived through this harvesting procedure and just knows how painful, excruciating it is, can just talk about some of the emotions and the pain that come through that. As it relates to the tank, we know that the tank was an ancient tank. This was a tank that was purchased, the freezer was purchased during the Reagan administration. How do we know that? I called up the tank manufacturer and they told me that. The alarms were turned off, we know, because nobody rushed in. When the liquid nitrogen was leaving, the temperatures in the tank were going up, and all of the material inside, all of those precious stem cells were dying. There are supposed to be alarms here. It is industry standard to have alarms. You have an alarm on this freezer like you have an alarm in your house so that if something is going wrong, somebody can respond in time. That simply didn't happen here. And it didn't happen here, we know, because the alarm was turned off. We see this time and again in these fortunately very rare but occurrences that do happen with these freezers. The alarms go off and the personnel decide, well, this is kind of annoying, and so let me turn it off. But alarms are supposed to be alarming. They're not supposed to be annoying. There's a reason they're there. It's for the safety. It's for the safety of Linda and Tim and their son and all the other families for whom we're fighting here. Linda and Tim, I'm happy to turn it over to you to talk about the pain that goes through the harvesting procedure.
Yeah, I mean, so the kids in preparation for going through a stem cell harvest are given shots to boost up those cells in the body in preparation for this harvest. And so when that's occurring, oftentimes those white blood cells that are within the bone, they are multiplying so many that it becomes painful on the kid's bones, or anybody that's ever gone through this. Not only that, but our son at the time had a chest line that was called a power line that was made specifically for this type of procedure. And so once the child is ready to have this harvest, we're dealing with, at that time, a 15-month-old child that we need to keep restricted in a hospital bed that is hooked up to this machine. So it's a long day process. Sometimes it goes into multiple days. And, you know, since then, that line has been replaced. And so if we had to ever do this again, he would have to go under surgery again, go through shots again, everything else. That would just be a terrible, painful process for him.
And my son's stem cell harvest was 2 or 3 12-hour days.
Yeah.
That's how long it took for them to be able to, I don't know the word other than harvest the stem cells from his body in order to collect as many as they needed in the event he was going to need them in the future.
Yeah, they have a goal amount of cells that they're trying to reach when they're doing this. And so that will decide how many days, depending on how long it takes to pull it from the body.
Thank you. And real quick, this is the moderator. We want to make sure that reporters on the line have a chance to pose their questions. So once again, if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to talk. And as a reminder, of course, the Q&A period is for reporters only. And if you're having any issues whatsoever with your audio or the raise your hand function, you can use the text-based Q&A box. And we'll do our best to get to those questions as well. As another reminder, if you need the news release related to today's news event, there's a link to the news release that's in the chat window. So you can check that. And if you do need to connect with anybody that you're hearing from today or get more info, I know that not all reporters want to take their questions online, but you can contact Max Carlin at 703-276-3255 to get any of that info or to connect with any of these speakers. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Really quickly, I'm just going to repeat where you can find materials related to the news event. They're going to be online at peifferwolf.com. That's www.peifferwolf.com with no spaces. So I'm seeing that we still don't have any questions queued up. I know there are several reporters on the line, though. I want to give folks an opportunity to ask a question. In the meantime, while we give people a minute, Adam, do you want to weigh in with any additional thoughts that maybe we didn't cover yet in our statements or in these answers?
Sure. Linda and Tim were talking very poignantly about how difficult it is to go through a stem cell harvest. And the idea of going through it again, not knowing that you're even going to be able to get any stem cells, let alone enough, through a reharvest, is just an untenable position for any parent. Stem cells are not like, you know, milk that spoils in your fridge where you can just go out and get more milk. You cannot necessarily do that with stem cells. Not only is the procedure incredibly painful, incredibly emotionally trying, but at the end of all of that, you might not have any more. And so CHLA took a freezer that should have been replaced after 10 years and kept it going for decades. In your kitchen freezer, you you typically replace it every 10 or 12 years. And so if a 30-year-old freezer isn't good enough to store your milk or your meat, then it's not good enough to store precious stem cells that could be life-saving for a child.
Thank you, Adam. And just as a very brief little reminder, if you do wish to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function, or if there are any issues with your audio, you can use the Q&A box below. We do encourage you to take advantage while we've got our speakers all here in the same place at the same time. But we do know that folks want to sometimes take their questions offline, and if you do need to connect with anyone you're hearing from today following the news event, please contact Max Carlin at 703-276-3255. Again, that's 703-276-3255. So I am doing one final call for questions. Not to be a nudge, I know we get a lot of reporters on the line, but I just want to make sure that we take advantage of the time we have today. I'm not seeing any further questions, so I encourage you to follow up with me, Max Carlin, if you need anything following the news event.
Max, if I may say one thing.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. We represent quite a number of families who have been victimized by Children's Hospital Los Angeles. We are filing lawsuits today. We have filed lawsuits today on behalf of many of them. But there are still other victims out there. It is not too late to file a lawsuit. If you want to talk about it, please feel free to reach out to me, to reach out to my firm, Peiffer Wolf. We would be happy to talk with you. We are here to make sure that you are heard and that there's some justice, and to make sure that this never happens again.
Thank you, Adam. So to everyone who joined today, we do thank you for participating in this news event sponsored by the law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, and Conway. We hope you have a great day and you're staying safe. And that will conclude today's news event. Thank you and take care.